Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show, live in the On Purpose Woman magazine and global community Facebook page. I'm Ginny Robertson, one of the hosts of the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show, and I'm also the founder of the On Purpose Woman magazine and the founder of the On Purpose Woman global community. My guest today is author, artist, quantum healer, soulful loving coach, and art of feminine presence teacher, Lulu Trevena. And we're going to be talking about sacred aging. So thank you for being with me, Lulu.
Yeah, I'm pleased to be here, Ginny. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. I did read that right. Sacred loving, right?
I liked that. I actually thought that. I was like,
soulful loving. It's soulful living, isn't it?
It is, but I like soulful loving too.
Wow. As soon as I read that, I thought, did you write that differently or did I write it differently? Maybe there's a message there for us somewhere, huh?
Maybe. Yeah.
Before we dive into this topic of sacred aging, which I am extremely passionate about and looking so forward to our conversation, I want to tell our viewers a bit more about you. Lulu Trevena is the founder of Live Life with Wonder. She's an award-winning author, artist, and quantum healing practitioner who's passionate about shifting the societal narrative around women and age. Her transformational programs will help you live with the confidence to do anything at any stage of life. And there's so much to talk about. Gosh, what I'd like to start with, though, I think, is how did you come to this work? Like, what was going on with you that this seemed like something you wanted to be doing? The part around aging specifically and changing that whole societal narrative.
Yeah. So I feel like I've been in the healing arts since birth. So I've kind of traveled this soul path of learning and enriching my life and healing. But last year when I turned 58, it was also the age my mum was when she passed. So I was really pondering last year about, what does age mean? And even though I knew I was 58, I kind of really didn't feel that age. And being aware of my mum and, really thinking, what more do I have to give in my life? What more do I want to experience? What more is wanting to rise up through me and for me to move ahead with that. So last year specifically, I was really pondering age a lot. We moved to the United States when I turned 50, and I was very happy in Australia with, my family, my friends, my community in various different arenas, and to kind of start again, which I think often we do get at this age. We do get a new direction, a start over. So I had that one at 50, and then my first book at 55, and then last year pondering my mum's age of her death. So yeah, I feel I'm definitely aligned to aging and what aging means for a woman, and also to break down some of the lies that society has around women and age, that, it's kind of like you're kind of moving out of I want to say the word juiciness comes up, moving away from being juicy, which I don't think that's very true. And I'm aware that the wisdom of women through knowing the actual healing journey that they've traveled is something that needs to be passed on. So to younger women and to women, in all areas of life, so that we can write something new. We are a constant changing and evolving society, and we need to be the ones that step up and help make those changes.
I agree with you. Thank you for that. And I want to talk more a little bit later about some of those lies that are around women and aging. And I also know we're going to dig deeper into this idea of sacred aging, but just as a sort of a brief description, what do you think sacred aging is?
I think it's what you want it to be.
Okay.
So the word sacred, when we just kind of, I'm very a wordy person with being an author. And I also found out recently that my soul message is one of, words and communication. And I was saying to this woman I was working with, I can taste the words when I'm speaking. Mm-hmm. And she was like, not many people would say that, only certain people would say that they can taste words. So firstly, I would like people to understand what sacred means to them. And to me, it is a coming to myself place. This sacredness is dropping into myself and really understanding for myself, what do I feel is sacred? What do I think is sacred? How would I be showing I'm living from that place of importance and sacredness and purpose? So, sacred aging. I also had read The Female Brain by Dr. Luann Bresedin, and she talks about the chemical structure of the brain. For women, it really changes, with what we call menopause, but it's actually biologically happening in our body, so that mothering instinct is kind of softened down. Like we're not going to jump in front of the truck and all that sort of thing as much as we would if our child was younger. So it's the toning down of the chemicals in the body that then we tend to not focus outwardly, we come to focus back within ourselves. And when I read that, all that information around that, I could really understand when many years ago, like maybe 15 years ago, I used to hear about the Red Hat Society. And these women, they were like, I'm wearing my red hat and I'm doing whatever I want. And that happens at 50. They say basically around that age, what's happening within our body is about coming back to self for women, a real lot coming back to self. We've given out to others, we've given out to our family, and now we're coming back to ourselves. And for many of us that have traveled the healing journey, we've been doing that along the way. But this kind of overarching societal template that we have traveled, take care of others first, is the woman's in their DNA. So when we come back to taking care of ourselves, there's a whole other thing happening within us. And, you may have heard, they talk about the divine feminine rising, and, like the feminine is a very powerful, creative force. And society doesn't really tell you that. And when women realize, actually, that is so true, I can feel it, that's when they actually can be whatever they choose to be at whatever that age they choose to be at. So, yes, sacred aging, knowing what that means for you. And I want to say there needs to be a lot of tenderness that women bring back to themselves. They're very tender and giving to others, and now the tenderness like for themselves. So in the aging process, we know aging is a time of things are kind of dying, for lack of a better word, like the body is changing, just like the cycles of nature, that we can't do what we used to do, and we shouldn't expect to do, but we can focus to the areas that we want to now do those things that nurture us and support others in other ways.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And you mentioned the divine feminine. I think the society is terrified of the divine feminine.
Yeah.
And I'm just lumping all women into society too, because I think there's a lot of women who are terrified of that kind of power. Do you agree with that? That we may actually have inside of us that, wow, if I were to unleash that, ooh, or it's been so held down that they can't even imagine that they do have it. But I think it's kind of like the Salem witch hunts, it's the same kind of energy around. Oh, no, we got it. I think that's why they, well, I'm jumping around here a minute, but I want to say, and I want you to answer then what you were going to say. I have for years been kind of offended by this whole picture of a crone. I think we need to take the crone back, and because the crone is a wise woman, but the crone in many depictions is a witchy looking woman with a wart on her nose and just haggard and mean looking, like she's going to harm you in some way. And yet cronism, I think, is something to be honored and held as sacred, I believe. What do you think about everything I just said?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you even threw in the Salem witch hunts. I was like, we're really traveling a path today. So the crone, yeah, I used to have a kind of a strange connection with that crone energy, because often it is depicted as the hag, you know, like depleted, you know, not like rich and full, you know, like we imagine what we think wisdom is, like a fullness, like an overflow, whereas the hag tends to be like a drained. I recently have been doing some study around what's called the Madonna whore split, you know, throughout many religious texts. And, you know, for women, they're divided. Can I be the mother? Can I be the, you know, like the wild woman? Like we're kind of, you know, ping-ponging between them. And it's until we can embody all of them. Doesn't mean we have to act out anything, but until we can embody all of that, that is, they are all parts of, you know, who we are. So I'm definitely, you know, at 59, I'm in my crone years. And yeah, I guess I'm still playing with the term crone. So I like wise woman. And I do like wisdom weaver and thing, you know, I do make up my own little words here and there. But the energy of it being something potent, that's what I want, the energy of it to be potent, not kind of drained and, you know, moving
Juicy.
out.
You want it to be juicy.
I do. Full.
Yes, and not because the image of the crone is kind of like dried up. And that is the opposite of juicy, right? Yeah. And I don't think I will, and I think I've made enough peace with the crone word because I understand it's probably its original intent, but it's not a word that I can still use to describe me because I don't feel like I fit whatever that societal narrative is around it. But I like some of your words, so make up some more and write a book about it. Okay.
And you know, as we say, we're changing the societal narrative. So however we choose to do that, we can do it however we like.
Yeah. So I'm 10 years ahead of you. And I think, just from my life experience, that my generation of women is the first, what I call full generation of women to do life very differently from their mothers. There's like a half generation behind me where some women started it in, but I think we're the first like full generation after our mothers to do this. And I don't think the world was quite ready for it because, you know, so much came up around, you know, the word feminism got co-opted and treated as something wrong and bad. And, you know, I have a good friend she's half generation ahead of me, and she was out there, you know, on the streets, marching and fighting for women's rights. And she said, Ginny, I never knew anybody who burned their bra. She said that a lot of this stuff was just made up stuff to bring fear to people, because if you fear something, you won't listen to it or you won't want to see the other side. So I think this whole societal narrative, you know, I think my generation started to shift it, but we didn't have a clue how to do that. We were like flying blind. We had no role models or how to do life differently. It was just the times, I think. The 60s and 70s were conducive for that. So talk more about the societal narrative. And is there one particular narrative around women that you would most like to remove or to?
Well, probably you touched on the feminist idea that, you know, this is like within feminism is the essence of equality. It's not about fighting against men or degrading men, or it's really saying we want to partner, we want to be traveling together, we want to have that same equality. And as you say, you know, there's so much fear in society and they can spin it however they, you know, so choose, you know. Even the word patriarchy, we actually do live in a patriarchal society. So even when you say that word, sometimes now people get a little bit, you know, offensive, but that's a truth of how we live. How to change all of those, I think we only can do things a small step at a time. We can't change it hugely. And I would say coming back to the individual person, once again, back to the individual woman. what does that mean for you? How are your rights? Are you treated by the same rights as men? Is there things that need to change for you? Also, how are you on yourself? I want to say there's such a comparison thing between women, and it's up to us as women to stop that. So, you can be on watching a TV show or see a commercial or even on a call, and there's this constant narrative that a lot of us have, and we are looking at, her hair and this, and we are silently in this comparison. I want to say battle. It's kind of this battle of who am I amongst this? And I remember one of my mentors talking about sisterhood and about friends, and how in friendships we often positioning ourselves in a certain way of, so my hair's redder than her, so we've got a difference. Or, I like to climb mountains and she likes to swim. Oh, there's the difference. We kind of have to position ourselves among our friends because we can't kind of compete exactly at the same level.
We don't share the space, I guess.
That's right. It's like it's like this, who's better, who's whatever. And I really pondered that for a while. It's like, so I looked around at my friends and I can see why there's that difference between her and I, but, I can see the similarities, but we need the difference as well as the similarities. Mm-hmm. So in society, changing the societal narrative, we need the changes, but we also want to keep some of the old. We're not about throwing it all out with the baby with the bathwater. So I'm not sure if I went off on a tangent there, but I kind of, so, the feminism is one thing that, I would want all people to understand that it's just about wanting equality from that place of human decency, quality of, education, medical opportunities, salary, like all of those, basic things that we all need on this planet.
Yeah. And we're talking about feminism because it's part of what got many of us of a certain age to be a bit different and to be living life differently than our mothers and grandmothers did, to be more self-centered, to be more self-focused, and to not be always looking out there for the comparison, for the direction, for all of that. So it felt like we were going down a tangent, but I think we wrapped it up and we're back where we wanted to be, I believe. I do want to say one more thing about that, because I think it's important, even though it doesn't tie in necessarily to sacred aging. But years ago, I was a co-host of a radio show on WCBM here in Baltimore, and we had a man on who was, he was in Austin, so he was on remotely. And he was a professor at University of Texas at Austin. And he had written a book about pornography. And it was called Pornography and the End of Masculinity. And he'd come up from this place of how destructive it could be, not just to women, but to men. And he was talking about some pretty hardcore stuff. And he mentioned Andrea Dworkin, who was a huge, huge light, if you will, or activist in the feminist movement. And they were dear friends. And he said, women or people accuse Andrea Dworkin of hating men. He goes, she doesn't hate men. She loves men, and she just expects more of us. And I thought that was such a wonderful thing about, that the whole feminist thing needs men. We need men. Absolutely. To be part of that with us. It's not about us taking over. It's about us coexisting and co-creating and co-leading and all of that. So that just came to me, and I thought it was worth repeating because I think she was probably seen as in some very negative ways, but she just thought men could do better than some of the ones that she had seen. So,
and it comes back to that women having a voice. We talked about the divine feminine, like if we understood our power and, it's something more than what we've ever been led to believe, perhaps, but also our voice, the number of times that we as women can kind of, quickly close it and don't say what's really true for us, even though in our body we have the arising of energy that says, this is not okay, but we'll sort of like be a good girl, all of that sort of thing. We kind of have been programmed so much that we go into it automatically. So in the process, I believe in the sacred aging, it's really about untangling a lot of that, and really looking at it separately. I was having a talk about with one of my friends about, the ego, how we need our ego, but we also don't want it driving the bus.
You're right. Yeah.
We want it in the back, So when we understand what our ego has been doing to keep us safe and all that sort of thing, it's fine, but we also need to take a different look at the messages we've been getting from our ego or from society and realize, actually, if I separate all those out, which ones do I really believe in? Which ones feel right for me? Doesn't mean we're going to be all wild, crazy women, running naked through the streets, but,
Oh, we could.
That could be fun too.
I think you had a personal choice, right?
If that's what you think. But yeah, it's a real self-honoring place to come to. Like, we've got to remove all the tangles and really then choose from that powerful place of not just falling into it as if that's the only way.
I think that's so important what you just said about we have a choice, that we need to make the choice for us, because that goes against so much of how I was raised. I don't know how you were raised, but I was raised by older parents, so I have sisters who were almost a full generation ahead of me. But I was raised to be very, very polite, very good, it matters what the neighbors think. It matters how our family looks to the world. And there were rules around just that. And, when I left for college, I became a completely different person. I went all the way to the other side of the spectrum because I had no freedom before, and I had freedom now. And God, I'm fortunate I did get into any more trouble than I did. And I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about how sometimes when you felt that repressed, and some women don't even realize they've been kind of repressed or oppressed until they're even much older, there may be this tendency to go to the wild side for a bit and then decide if you want to stay there or just kind of come back. But I was full of rage. That mine was driven by rage, which has its place. It has its place.
And if you imagine anything suppressed, like held down for a long time, it needs the release. And so, I love that you say rage. Like, women aren't really allowed to be angry, and definitely rage. That's like too far down the spectrum. But when we can own and honor it, not act it out, own and honor. Yeah, I feel this rage, this ferocious rage, arising, and how can I use that? What can I use it for? Because it's a very fine line between passion and rage. And people think passion's way over here and rage is but they're actually so close together. They have a similar vibrational energy that's moving. It's a very moving energetic force. It has power, it has force. Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way before, but I agree with you totally now that you bring it up. Yeah. And I think both of those, passion and rage, can scare just the hell out of women. And especially women of a certain age.
The hell out of everyone.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I think, because anytime I've actually shown my anger in like really what was going on, it has disturbed people. It has been, and it wasn't some of my finest moments. I mean, I haven't done that a lot, but yet it's disturbing because, it was rocking the boat. And that's the other thing, that good girls who grow up to be women now, who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and up, it's hard to shift from the good girl to the sacred woman who is aging with sacredness and with this self-honoring that you talk about, without getting in the muck first. I mean, that's how I see it, is you can't just go from here and being oppressed and docile and pleasing everyone else and not even knowing what pleases ourselves and go right into that, okay, I'm going to do aging differently now. Which brings me to, you talk a lot about healing and why that's so important if we're going to be aging in a way that's sacred for us. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. And you said the thing about, we can't go from the good girl to the wild sort of right at aging, which is true. But often what happens for many people is the word disease, the dis-ease is so much physical in their body that they do get some sort of disease. And that's kind of like a crossroad, they have to face something, in themselves. So unfortunately, we often as humans, we wait for that line in the sand and then we make a choice. So if we can consciously make small choices, as I said, the unraveling, what part of the healing journey is not healed? What is it much more physical? Is my emotional states need to be looked at? Is my thought process, very critical or judgmental of others or whatever. So if we think of the healing journey, that it is happening from birth to death, there is a healing journey happening. Whether we want to focus on it or not, there is a healing journey happening. So if we make that a much more a conscious decision of deciding, where we want to heal, what we need to heal, or actually even asking someone that's known us a long time, and this is a scary place for many people, actually going up to someone that's known you for a long time and asking, what do you think is one of my most destructive blind spots? Like, I don't know if you can feel that. There's
Definitely, yeah.
Oh, what if they tell me? So, and I would only do it with someone that you really trust. I wouldn't say go and just ask anyone, and especially not someone you're having a conflict with. That would be more destructive, I think. So yeah, the healing journey needs to be like how we would heal a child. Your child's sick and you would rock the child and you'd care for the child. We tend to think we have to do it sort of hard and battle through and all that. If we could take the healing journey much more gentle, but also we're going to have to face some, demons and, our own ego and the critical voice and all those. So I think the healing journey is the way to be on the planet. I don't think you can't really bypass or sidestep. You can definitely addict out on things and numb and, divert your attention, or you can do all of that. But I think it's better to turn towards than to turn away from. So yeah, I encourage people to do healing, and your timeline is your timeline. No one can tell you how. I think about grief, and I've had friends that have lost, loved ones and, even children. And there's no way you can tell someone how their grief process will go. It will twist and turn, and we can say, there's 5 stages to grief and all those, but it's not like a linear straight, line. It's something very complex and also something very personal. So, if we think there's 8 billion people on the planet, there's 8 billion ways to do life even, there's no one way to do life. So there's no one way to do healing, but having good support people and, loving friends and taking, a tender look at yourself in a very loving way.
I think the tenderness you mentioned earlier and then just now is so important. Like you said, it's we heal ourselves, or we heal with ourselves the way we would help our child heal, with that same tenderness too, of instead of expecting, or why is that happening, or why didn't I get this yet, or just a comparison again, because maybe you think somebody else has handled that already, or I remember hearing from one of my sisters who's no longer with us, but she years ago when I was going through a lot of stuff myself, and I kind of distanced myself from my family for a while. I was in my late 30s and I'd gone through a divorce and I hadn't gotten much support with that because we don't do that in our family. And so I was going through some changes and I decided I needed to distance myself a bit. And my sister called me just really angry because in her world, I had everything growing up. Why wasn't I more grateful? You know, because she was viewing it from that very, there wasn't anything wrong with our family. So how could there be anything wrong with me, right? How could I need to heal from anything or distance myself? So that can be challenging when we're the only one maybe in our family who feels like we need to do something different. You know, and we're not getting support with that because again, it's like, you know, you don't ask certain people you don't ask that question, what do you think is my biggest blind spot? You also, you know, I remember after doing quite a bit of work, some heavy, intense, deep work, you know, I went home and I confronted my mother one night because I felt like she pushed me into a corner and I did it so unskillfully and so unlovingly, and it didn't work. And, you know, I went home with my tail between my legs, kind of realizing, okay, there was probably a better way to do that, but that's how I did it. And that's what came up right then. And I'm going to, you know, I'll just learn from that. But I say all that just, I had no idea I was going to say any of it, just to say that healing is messy.
Absolutely. And I have my own messy stories as well. And also, you know, you spoke about your sister and, you know, when people don't want to look at their own thing, they're very good at projecting it back to the person that seems to be making trouble for the rest of the people because
right.
Like, if you're going to dig into stuff, it's going to unsettle the apple cart. I remember when I had my children, they talked, it wasn't about childhood, but it was talking about the mobile over the top of a child's, crib. And when the mobile moves, when one moves, all of them move. So like the healing journey, it says if one person starts going this other path, the others just start moving and they're like, what's happening? So I get that in families, when one person starts to move through things, it does unsettle everyone. And I really think it is good to, you know, like separate out and do your journey how you need to do it. And yes, do the unskilled, what do you call it?
Vomiting.
Vomiting out of your mouth that's very unskilled, and then know how to repair and, you know, restore those things that are important to you. Because, you know, once you do something wrong too, you know, the inner critic's going to be got the whip again. You shouldn't have done that. Like, you know, we do that so easily to ourselves. And that's why I talk about tenderness, you know, and even as I say the word tenderness, I know in my body how I've been much more like, you know, I can be a little bit abrupt in some things, and tenderness just has this way of just softening us. And we have this physical body as a beautiful reminder that we actually have to be in our body, like really feel it. If you're cutting off your feelings and not feeling in your body, you know, you're usually stuck quite up in your head. So, you know, the more we can do things like breath work or any sort of movement, or, you know, going out in nature. I love to walk with bare feet on the earth. I don't know, there's something about bare feet, you know, and they talk about the electromagnetic, you know, pulse of the earth and all that. But it just feels good. Like, do things that feel good and make you come home in your body. So you're just not in this thought process of life all the time. Yeah.
Okay. I think that could be a mantra for sacred aging. Do things that feel good, right? And are good for us, I guess, maybe as a caveat there. But, you know, do things that feel good. And if there's a consequence to it, you'll learn the consequence possibly, you know. But for so many women, I think it's a trial and error kind of thing anyway, especially when they've lived 40, 50, 60 years, maybe. not ever looking within, not ever giving to themselves, not using tenderness, not, just all those things, but yet there's something there. It's that, do you remember the book Simple Abundance that came out many years
Oh,
ago
yeah.
by Sarah Von Brothnick?
55
It was
days.
a really popular book, got me started on doing a gratitude journal and all kinds of stuff. But she read another book, which didn't get as much attention, but it was called Something More. And it was more around aging. And she talked about how the book was about an excavation for your soul to kind of discover what do you actually like, what do you want, what pleases you, and how we haven't been conditioned primarily as women to even ask ourselves those questions, but how much more important they even get once we're in the aging, the later years, because our children don't need us the way they did. We may decide to retire from a job. We may just have this space now to do something for ourselves. But so many women don't even know that that's a possibility because we didn't see our mothers doing it. My mother she announced that she was retired when my father did, which meant she wasn't vacuuming anymore. And she did a few things. She took some painting and things like that, but she wasn't doing what I could tell, at least, that deeper seeking, because it was considered, I think, kind of self-absorbed, or no, people didn't go to therapy because there was this stigma around seeing a therapist. I remember when I told her I was going into therapy in my mid-30s, she goes, but they blame everything on your mother in therapy. And I'm like, well, I don't know, but if the shoe fits, I guess we'll have to all wear it, And so I just think that there's this can be a shock, I guess, to women when at a certain age we realize there's something more. There's got to be something more. I'm feeling it. I'm yearning for it. So how do women in the sacred aging process, or maybe they're just sticking their toe in the water, how do you suggest they might begin that a little bit more? Like we talked about healing. Is there, and I know you'll probably say that silence is really important for this, but just talk a little bit about some things that you think a woman who's watching could do right away, could just sit and do, or be, or something.
Yeah.
I know I'm hitting you with a...
No, this is beautiful. I've actually just written a chapter in Sacred Medicine, which is coming out in about a month's time. And I talked about these two things. These are very simple words: fascination and savoring.
Oh.
So just the energy of being fascinated with things, like it takes us out of that programmed way of everything, being the same, or actually even how we want it. Like if you have a fascination for something, it just takes it into that whole different realm of, awe and wonder, which, my business name is Live Life with Wonder. So wonder is one of the, I guess, messages I have to bring to the earth is, have more wonder in our life. So fascination. So in your day, pause when you can and look around and just be fascinated by something. Like, for example, on the other side of the room, I can see a couple of candles, and I'm thinking, oh, they chose these little shaped glass to put the wax in. And I wonder why. And I can see there's little petals. Like, be in the fascination of who chose to do that. Wonder what they were thinking. Was, what part of the planet were these made? Like just in that inquiry of not trying to find an answer, just being in the fascination of that. And then the other one, savoring.
It's a delicious word,
isn't it? You can drool a little with that word. So, when you do things, whether it be wash your hands, whether it be, I'm thinking of just basic things that we do in drink your coffee, things that you do just, I guess, on automatic. We just do these automatic. Oh, time for a cup of tea, time for a coffee. Like really pause and savor. So when you said, I was you thought I was going to talk about silence, I'm going to talk more about pausing, because silence is beautiful and I'm a meditator and I love all that, but pausing, because we live like this, we live ahead of ourselves. Like we're always moving in this. And when we drop back and down, and this is why I talk with Art of Feminine Presence about the womb space, women need to be into this space. They're always in their heart, and this leads, but we need to be back in our body, in our womb, in our heart, as well. So when we pause and we take time to savor, something totally different happens in our brain waves, something totally different happens in our body. And then it's like we're actually self-nurturing ourselves. So they're the two things I would recommend, this having fascination and savoring each moment, and when you remember, we can't stop and savor every single moment. We are living lives and families, etc. But taking enough time to pause, and no one else can do that for you. Only you can do that. So it's self-nurturing, self-fulfilling, self-empowering, all of those beautiful things.
I love everything about what you just said, the pausing, the fascination, and the savoring. And when I think about pausing, it's not a word I use. That's so different from silence, because I think when people say, well, you have to, sit in silence, meditate, that's a commitment to sit, and that may be too much sometimes for people to start with, but we can all pause for 10 seconds, for a minute.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of, that cup of tea on a cold winter morning. And I love just wrapping my hands around the cup and feeling the warmth and just smelling it. And, that's savoring as well. And I consider myself, I'm extremely curious about things. But the thing with curiosity, I just realized from you, is that often when I'm curious, I'm looking for an answer as well.
Yeah.
And fascination just leaves it. I am fascinated by these huge trees outside my window that have all these brown leaves still hanging where the cicadas laid their eggs and the leaves died. I'm fascinated by wonder when they will drop off finally. I don't have an answer for that. I don't care. It's curiosity, but it's better than curiosity. Fascination. And those aren't words that I think are in our everyday vocabulary.
Yeah.
Pausing, fascination, and especially savoring. We savor certain tastes, certain foods, maybe we might savor, but savoring life and savoring a moment, that is extremely delicious. I love that.
And as you said the word pause, like just hearing pause or stop, you get the different. I want to say pause has this roundness. So does fascination and savoring. Whereas curiosity, it's like it's more direct. There's I need an answer. Give me the answer.
Yeah.
So and even when I say that, like, a woman is round. The woman herself, the essence of woman is round. The man is more linear, angular, straight. So, the more we embody, as I said before, down into our womb space, more we fully embody this roundness of the whole of our being, and definitely our womb. Women have this such beautiful essence and energy and potency, and they can tap into it bit by bit by bit. And these are ways to do it, with the fascination, dropping back, pausing, savoring, like slowing down. We're much more a slower way of being. You really can't force birth, although we do try to do that. It needs to happen in its own rhythm and time. So a woman has her own rhythm and time, and once she gets in sync with her own, what she truly wants, it things do change beautifully.
And there's the time and the space to do more of that when the responsibilities are lessened. When it's more about me. Yeah. Wow, I could talk about this for another hour, but I think it's probably about time for us to wrap up. So first, Lulu, tell everyone how about your work and how they can find out more about your work and your books.
Okay, yeah. So my business name is Live Life with Wonder. I'm going to put that into the chat later. I also have numerous books. My first book was called Soul Blessings, and it's beautiful art and poetic prose. I also have a deck of cards called Moments of Transformation. They're also available on my website. And my latest book is a collaborative book for women over 50. I have 22 beautiful women from around the globe who've told their story about crossroads in their life, challenges, losing people, and they tell it from a perspective of what it offered them from going through this actual situation, this experience. And then they also give some beautiful, helpful tools. So it's called Wholehearted Wonder Women 50 Plus. We do have a community on Facebook, and I'll pop that in the chat. It's called the Wholehearted Wonder Women Global Community. I do quantum healing. I do it also globally. I do soulful loving and living. So I've been told about coaching. And so, yeah, I'm open to people just connecting, having a connection call with me, and we can see, how we connect. I have a beautiful wonder quiz on my website. So I invite you to go and do that. It's free to do that. Yeah. And I'll put my details in the chat after.
I don't know if the chat actually shows up on the live, does it?
But I can go to live.
That's what you mean. That's what I thought. Okay, yes, because I think your book on Wholehearted Wonder Women 50 Plus would be a really great next step for anyone watching this and saying, I want more of whatever Lulu's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So you're reading about real women who are embracing and learning from the things that have happened to them up to this point in their life and living in that space of sacred aging, their own way, whatever that means to them. Before I end this, Lulu, is there anything that you'd like to add that we didn't touch on, or a final word of wisdom?
So yeah, as we were talking about the fascination and the savoring, I think there are some key things for women to just take right now and use however they see fit. I do want to remind us to stop whatever competitive, judgmental thing that often has happened amongst women, because when we reclaim for ourselves that I'm not that person, I don't want that to be part of my life, that ripples out. So I guess the beautiful, be the change in the world, be it for yourself. And of course, once again, the word tenderness, have a lot of tenderness for yourself, because I just meet beautiful women all over the world. I feel so blessed, and I know everyone has such beautiful gifts to offer each other. So I just hope women, do that, and when they do that, it nurtures themselves. So it's a beautiful, give and receive, and it just keeps going.
So women, give yourself the gifts of tenderness and fascination and savoring and pausing. Those are, I'm taking that on. I'm shifting some things because of our conversation today. So thank you so much, Lulu, for being with me and for sharing your wonderful wisdom, your wonder, your gifts of words. I mean, because you do taste words. That's how you came up with these delicious words of fascination and savoring and pausing. So thank you for that. And thank you everyone else for being with us today and watching the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show live in the On Purpose Woman magazine and Global Community Facebook page. There are 3 interviews next week. On Tuesday of next week, I'll be talking with Mia Zachary about how she went from rock bottom to the core. If you want to know what that's about, you're going to have to watch either us live or on the replay. On Thursday of next week, Catherine Yarborough, the other host of the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show, will chat with Karen DeGrava about how yo-yo dieting isn't fun. And on Friday, I'll talk with Elizabeth McCain about Who are we now in a post-pandemic world? Though we're not really in a post-pandemic world yet, I don't think. People are coming back out. So Elizabeth has some great words of wisdom about how we might want to make that re-entry and look at what we've done over the last year and a half as maybe some gifts and some things we can learn from. So to see all of the scheduled interviews for August, you can go to On Purpose Woman Magazine, onpurposewomanmagazine.com, and you'll see a 4-page spread with all of our topics. And if you love this interview and you want to share it with your friends, it will be on our YouTube channel within the next 48 hours. So you can go over to the On Purpose Woman Global Community channel on YouTube, subscribe, sign up for notifications, and that way when this is available, it'll be easy for you to share it with your friends. And please let us know what you think. There's already over 70 inspiring, educational, fun interviews from real women who are living a real purpose out there in the world and making their own unique difference. So thank you again for watching the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show.